Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dennis Steigerwalt. I'm the president of the Housing Innovation Alliance, and we're going to kick off our one-hour webinar on attainability, looking at the long game, with our co-host, Tom Hoban of Kitson Partners. So we've had the opportunity to get to know Tom over the past few months, and we're excited to connect with him and his team over this webinar. Before we kick things off, just like to bring everybody back to the Housing Alliance's vision. We are a nationwide community for new thinking in housing. We look for opportunities to create new partnerships, to formulate new solutions, to drive attainability and sustainability, looking at higher quality, higher value product for the consumer and for the overall marketplace. We use the economics of the middle market to drive the discussion, but housing attainability is an issue that will impact us all, no matter what your price point or price segment is. And we do this by connecting thought leaders across the delivery chain, looking from dirt to dweller and finding the best and brightest in each of those areas with a specific focus on next generation leaders. So this particular activity, this virtual roundtable, is a building block in our overall attainability roadmap that we've been compiling as an organization, as a community over the past few months, and that we'll be releasing towards the beginning of next year. This also builds into the live roundtable event we'll be hosting in Denver on November 12th and 13th, middle of next month. So we're going to hit three key areas at that event and within our report, focusing on place, product, and production. We're excited about today's conversation because Tom's going to be able to start with place and work all the way down through product and production as Babcock Ranch looks at innovation in the long term. Before we kick things off, I do want to say thank you to all of our partners and our community members whose underwriting makes all this conversation and dialogue possible. So a big thank you to everyone who's participating. And now to get to Tom. So Tom is president and CIO of Kitson Partners. They're one of the nation's premier placemakers. And one of the things that excites us most about this discussion is Tom's leading a project called Babcock Ranch in Florida. And he's going to get into the details of Kitson and that particular project. But they've recently led a collaborative workshop to look at how can they collaborate with home builders to embrace innovation and technology and set a new standard for home building within their communities, both Babcock and looking forward. There's four specific areas of focus that they had in that workshop, and Tom will share with us later. One is off-site home construction and manufacturing, energy efficiency, technology and the smart home concept, and then health and wellness. As we go through today's discussion, there'll be a few stopping points where we'll ask for questions, but if along the way something comes up you want to pose to Tom or to the team, please type it in the question and answer box, and this is the best place to submit your questions, and this is the easiest way for us to field them and to make sure they get addressed on time. And with that, I'll hand it off to Tom, and he'll take it from here.
Great, thanks Dennis, and thanks Betsy for all the help and getting this organized for today. It's an honor to be on this webinar with the folks here, and these formats are great because I can't tell how many people I put to sleep when it's in a webinar format. So thanks for doing this after lunch. I'll try to be as productive as I can getting through the slides to allow for some Q&A at the end. And as Dennis said, you guys, whoever's on the call, if anyone would like to submit questions, feel free to do so throughout. We're going to cover three kind of broad topics. One is, Kitson Partners, who we are. Two would just be Babcock Ranch, which is really our hallmark project here in the state of Florida. And then, as Dennis said, kind of build up to the end here, which is the workshop we just hosted back in September. So just a real quick snapshot on Kitson. We've been around for a long time. We've been at this since the early 90s. Master plan community development has been kind of our bread and butter business for that entire duration. We entered into the retail shopping center space probably in the early 2000s. If you're looking at here on this first slide is just a graphic of the state of Florida. The red boxes being some current master plan communities we've got, and the blue dots being our retail shopping center portfolio, which is about 1.5 million square feet. So we've done a lot throughout the past. It's a snapshot of where we are currently. And you can see Babcock down here in the Fort Myers market in Southwest Florida, which we'll get to here in a short stint. Just a quick snapshot of some of our senior management. Sid Kitson is my partner. He's our CEO. He's the founder of Kitson Partners. This is our senior management team, which we're very proud of. all of which have long tenure with the company. We've got a great, we like to think we've built a great company culture and are able to retain a lot of the strong talent that we have here at the company. We're really proud of our board. Our advisory board is a very diverse group and is very influential on our strategic direction within the company and specifically within Babcock Ranch. Just quickly, Larry Burns, former head of R&D at General Motors. He's been one of the visionaries behind electric vehicles as well as autonomous vehicles. He's been a big reason why we have autonomous vehicles at Babcock Ranch today. Among other things, Jeb Bush, one of his passions is education. He's a big reason we led with education with a charter school in the first phase. Again, among other things, Peter Rummel, who everyone in our industry knows, one of the godfathers of our business and the master plan community placemaking side. He's been a huge guiding hand to us. Bill Smith, who is Wall Street executive of 30 plus years, incredibly influential to us on the capital side, structuring side, on the capital solutions front. And then Will Weatherford, finally, youngest Speaker of the House here in Florida, incredibly networked here in the state and helps us really navigate through some tricky waters on the political side. So collectively, these 5 individuals have had a big influence on our company and on Babcock specifically. Just a little sampling of some of the stuff we've done. We don't need to get into too much detail on it. You can kind of just see it kind of segues into our next slide, which is really, Dennis mentioned placemaking, which has been a big part of who we are and our DNA at Kitson. We believe, focusing on the details and trying to create great places leads to better results. It's a better experience for the customer and the home buyer. It also leads to, in our opinion, outsized returns from a volume and a price premium perspective. So again, focusing on the right things, not just trying to be different for the sake of being different, but things that you believe are going to resonate with the home buyer and the consumer and result in a superior experience and lifestyle. That's where we tend to focus. Bay Pines was a mixed use site up in St. Pete. 60 acres of mixed use. Talus Park is a high-end luxury gated golf course community in Naples. And Ibis Golf and Country Club is a golf course community here in West Palm Beach, which is right around the corner from where we're headquartered. And Ibis is what brought us to Florida back in the mid-90s from the Northeast. And we've been tied to that project ever since. I'll stop there real quick. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to chime in. If not, I can keep going.
I'd say at the moment, keep going.
Great. Okay, so Babcock Ranch. Let's talk about Babcock. So Babcock Ranch is the largest new town being developed in Southwest Florida, or in Florida. It's located in Southwest Florida. It's about 25 minutes north of the Fort Myers Airport, if you're familiar with that. We bought 91,000 acres initially, and we sold 73,000 acres back to the state of Florida and kept 18,000 acres for development. On that 18,000 acres, if we go back one slide here, of the 18,000 acres, we got entitlements for about just under 20,000 homes and 6 million square feet of commercial space. So when all said and done, 20 plus years or so from now, there'll be 50,000 people living at Babcock Ranch. And so, part of this, just almost by definition, when you have a project of this size and scale, it kind of stopped us in our tracks back when we bought it in 06 and 05 to think about the future and think about how do we embrace some of the change that's taking place, the innovation, the technology, and how do we bring it into the fabric of Babcock? And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. But again, I think the size and scale of Babcock being one of the primary reasons that we took that approach, knowing we were going to be in a project for a 20-year plus runway with multiple cycles, the need to kind of open our eyes and embrace what was happening around the world from a technology perspective seemed to be a pretty good recipe for potential success. So locationally, we like this map on the left. It's obviously Florida's a big state. We got over 20 million people, third most populous state in the country. This is an actual shot from NASA at night that shows basically where everybody lives. So this is just lights at night. You can see along the East Coast, up and down the West Coast, and that little corridor between the West Coast and East Coast is I-4 that connects the two, and in Jacksonville there up in the Northeast. Babcock being located in Southwest Florida there, lower left-hand side of the map on the left. If you look on the right, it's a busy looking map, but if you look at it, all these blue dots represent people. And if you look at path of growth, you've kind of got people kind of on the Cape Coral side on the coast where Southwest Florida settled that are now kind of making their way inland to the east. And you've got the folks that were in South kind of Collier County that are now migrating into Lee County, which are now migrating into Charlotte County. And those two paths kind of converge somewhat at Babcock Ranch, which you see there in the blue over there on the right-hand side of the map with the star on it. If you look around Babcock, you can see the green shaded areas. That's the 91,000 acres total. So that's the 73,000 acres we sold to the state. And if you look to the west of Babcock Ranch, you'll see more green shaded area. That's another 60,000 acres that the Babcock family gifted to the state of Florida back in the 50s and 60s. So when you talk about barriers to entry and you talk about path of growth, we sit at a pretty interesting spot where there's really nothing of any sort of significant size or scale that can be built around us due to the natural preserve that exists on both east and west sides of Babcock Ranch. I said we're about 20 miles from the airport. You can see Southwest Florida International Airport, just under 9 million passengers this past year came in and out of that airport. We're about 15 miles from downtown Fort Myers, and the Punta Gorda Airport on the upper side of the picture did about 1.3 million passengers over the last 12 months. So fairly accessible to the airports and accessible to downtown Fort Myers. Not easy to find 91,000 acres or 18,000 acres that's this close to services and to airports. Given the approach, this page kind of highlights, or this slide highlights some of the key initiatives that were the pillars of the strategy side behind Babcock. And we knew out of the gate, we could not be all things to all people. We're developers. We know that business very well. A lot of the components that we're in are not businesses that we know well, but we know are very important to the success of Babcock. And so we've taken a very partner-minded approach in searching out what we believe to be the best of breed across these different segments. Leading with environmental, when we sold 73,000 acres to the state of Florida, as you can imagine, the environmental focus on this and eyeballs on this was pretty significant. We basically opened up the kimono to the environmental community, invited them in, and invited the Audubon Society in, the World Wildlife Fund in, our federation in, the Florida Fish and Wildlife here in the state, even the Sierra Club, and gave them really kind of a seat at the table as we were drawing lines on the page to figure out, of the 91,000 acres we were buying, where were we going to develop? And so that ended up being a very strategic move and has paid a lot of dividends for us in the eyes of the environmental world, which I think embraced Babcock Ranch, given we preserved 80% of it in the sale of the state, and of the 18,000 acres that we've kept for development, we're preserving half of that as well. So about 9,000 acres of the 18,000 will be green space. So in the aggregate, across the 91,000 acres we bought, about 90% of it's going to be in preservation. So from that standpoint, a very keen eye on environmental stewardship. On the energy side, we just had this initiative from the get-go that we're the Sunshine State. We can do better on a long-term basis than the current coal, gas plants, and worked very hard with Florida Power and Light to come up with a program where they came in and on 440 acres of land, built a 75 megawatt solar array, which powers the town. And so when the sun is shining, Babcock is powered by solar energy. At night and on cloudy days, we back into the grid because storage is not where it needs to be yet from a macro perspective. So we can't get totally off the grid yet, but the goal is to get there at some point. Florida Power and Light has also installed the first of its kind solar to battery storage on the property, which allows us probably about plus or minus 4 hours of time once the sun goes down that we can redistribute energy through that solar to battery storage facility they put in place. Storm safety, we're in Southwest Florida and South Florida in general. Obviously, anyone who does business down here or lives down here understands the importance of this. We're 30 feet above sea level, which is a virtual mountain here in Florida, given that most land positions down in South Florida are at sea level. We're inland, so we're outside the storm surge, and so we've got a pretty strong storm resilient story to tell. The solar helps bolster that as well. Technology is a big push. We've been able to bring in CenturyLink to provide a gig, a fiber to every home and every business at Babcock. We partnered with a local South Florida technology firm called Levitas to create our own smart community app. Think of it as a digital concierge for those living at Babcock Ranch. And we've got a lot more we're trying to accomplish, which we'll get into later on the home technology front, smart home front. Health and wellness, another big pillar for Babcock. takes on many shapes and forms within Babcock Ranch. It's a very embrace the outdoors type of lifestyle. We've got over 50 miles of hiking and biking trails. We've got community gardens. We've got farm to table food. And we've also partnered with the largest healthcare provider in Southwest Florida, which is Lee Health. And they operate our 25,000 square foot health and wellness center at Babcock. So it's got a very keen focus on the health and wellness side, which is interesting when we get to the home buyers who are moving in. Education, I mentioned it before. Typically you don't lead projects like this with education on the forefront, but we did. And we've got a charter school K-8, which has desks for 500 students, of which right now, calendar year 2019-2020, we've got about 425 students in the school, of which 120 are actually Babcock's residents. So been a very big game changer for us. I think if you look at the demographics in Southwest Florida, it's a very boomer dominated retiree demographic. We've been able to bring in a lot of families in the home buying funnel due to the school. In the new school, it's a project-based learning school. It got an A rating its first year out of the gate. And so we've seen about 50% of our home buyers are actually families. And I think prior to the school opening, all the experts were telling us we should assume that 80% to 90% of our home buyers are going to be retirees. So we've got a very interesting demographic mix due to this, in large part to the school. Transportation, we wanted to really try to push the envelope on autonomous transportation. We're very focused on creating an environment that provides alternative transportation besides your car. So whether that's a bike, whether that's a zip car, whether that's a ferry across the lake, whatever it is, we prefer to keep the vehicles off the street if at all possible. So we partnered with Transdev, which is the world's largest transportation company, and it brought in Easy Mile autonomous shuttles, which have largely been used since January of 18 when we launched it as a sales and marketing tool for the folks that come in as prospective home buyers come in on the weekends to look at Babcock as a potential place to live. They're allowed to get in the AV and get a tour of phase one and see the models and specs that are up in phase one in the different neighborhoods. We're on the verge of rolling out through the smart app we've created more of an on-demand service, Uber-like service for that AV to get you to and from points of interest within Babcock Ranch, as well as to get goods delivered from our restaurant and general store to and from your home. So very excited about that. It creates a lot of energy and a lot of buzz on the sales and marketing side and a lot of traffic that comes through Babcock just to see the autonomous shuttles. And then obviously it's a fun environment. We want to always remind ourselves we're trying to create a great lifestyle for folks to live in, whether they're young families or retirees. The fun element's important, as everyone on this call knows and appreciates. We work hard at trying to create opportunities for programming and events throughout the calendar year at Babcock Ranch to make it fun. This is just some, I think we've garnered a lot of international attention, largely tied to the solar and the AV, the autonomous shuttles. So this is just some snippets. I don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but CBS, Fox News, Bloomberg, et cetera, CNN, we've had a lot of great press on all the things we're trying to do to create a unique place, a unique lifestyle at Babcock. I talked about this already, but we've got 440 acres of solar right now, which is 343,000 panels. Florida Power and Light is under development on the second phase of that, which is another 440 acres, which will have another 343,000 panels and another 75 megawatts. So we'll have 150 megawatts here within the next 6 months, which is more than enough power to power the town. Again, the solar to battery system is really the golden goose here that we're trying to figure out. And I should say Florida Power and Light's trying to figure out and using Babcock Ranch as a test bed for that. So we can participate in that and hopefully be some piece of cracking the code on getting off the grid through this renewable energy source at Babcock. We're also, everything we build is Florida Green Build Coalition certified, just to kind of keep ourselves grounded on the energy side and efficiency side. We own our own water utility and wastewater utility. It's called Town and Country. So we've got a very sustainable approach to that as well. And we've also got on-site sod farms to provide, locally sourced sod materials and landscape materials for our community. So very, very, very sustainability grounded.
Okay, quick question for you on that one.
Yeah.
Tom, are you tracking the amount of energy and the amount of water savings that you have in the community?
Yeah, so the energy, so we don't own the utility. It's owned by Florida Power and Light. And so, and as I said, we aren't off the grid. We have to back into the grid. And so at this point on the energy side, it's an incredible clean energy story from a solar perspective when the sun's out. But due to the fact that we no one in the industry or the world yet, despite Elon Musk's efforts, has been able to crack the code on storage. So until we can, the utility scale solar does not provide an economic benefit to the home buyer. It's a clean energy story that I think as we get further in advancement of the technology of battery storage, ideally we can get off the grid and have that economic story. On the water side, yes, I think we've got data on the water consumption and what the standards are per household versus what they are at Babcock Ranch, and we're able to, and again, in cooperation with our builders through low flow toilets and faucets and whatnot, we can move the needle on that as well. This snapshot of our school, the picture on the top is the Babcock Neighborhood School. That's the K-8 charter school. It's a STEAM-based curriculum, and it's a project-based learning. So, simply put, don't tell me how to do something, show me how to do something. And so project-based learning is really kind of doing it live in project-based settings with teammates. And it's really seems to be the way education's heading on the K-8 front, and even perhaps in the K-12 front. And it's been hugely embraced by the local region down in Southwest Florida. It's been a huge success so far for us. We've got a high school charter approved as well that will be coming online officially in 2021, 2022. We've also got the picture on the lower right is really kind of pre-K and daycare. Another important piece of the puzzle from a housing perspective, with a lot of young families moving in who had younger children. There was a strong demand for daycare and pre-K for those younger children. So that's there as well. So we kind of pre-K through 8, it'll be pre-K through 12 here by 2021, 2022. And we've got this kind of feeling that as everyone has heard and talked about, lifelong learning is an important piece of the puzzle, which I can get into in our facility there called the Hatchery in Founders Square. A lot happening on this slide. I won't get through all the detail of it, just to say that we've been at this for a long time. It's 15 years in the making. 05 through 2015, that 10-year period, because of the Great Recession that hit in 08, 09, we were kind of ready to go, if you will, in 08, 09, and obviously given the overall macro environment, really hit the brakes, and we're really waiting for the recovery to be more in the rearview mirror and have enough risk boxes checked to get started. So we broke ground in 15 after a long stretch of planning and design and strategy. So we broke ground in November of 15. We're just about 4 years into the groundbreaking. It's been blowing and going since. I'll get into some stats on a couple slides ahead. We've got about 10 builders in Babcock today, 3 of which are publicly traded builders: Lennar, Pulte, and Meritage. We've also got 7 other local regional builders they're all building at Babcock Ranch today. It's just worth noting to the group, I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole on it, but we've got an independent special district at Babcock, which is a legislatively approved district. Unlike CDDs, we basically piggybacked on top of what Walt Disney World did back in the 70s when they created Disney World. They formed an independent special district called Reedy Creek. And we took the Reedy Creek playbook and copied it for Babcock. And it's essentially a superpowered CDD ours was approved legislatively for up to $10 billion in tax-exempt bonds. On top of that, it gives us a little more autonomy where we can do things that a typical CDD can't, i.e. we can partner with public utilities like Florida Power and Light, like CenturyLink on the fiber, like the water utility, et cetera, in a more efficient way tied to this. So it helps us cut through a lot of red tape and be more efficient when it comes to approving and financing different infrastructure components within Babcock Ranch. It's been a huge benefit to us and our partners. Okay, so here's Babcock. The map on the left, the red perimeter shows you the full 18,000 acres of Babcock Ranch. The green around it is part of that 73,000 acre preserve that we sold to the state. You can see on the top, the very top of the graph on the left, the blue area, that's where the solar sits. So that's where the 75 megawatts, what's shown in this picture shows the phase 1 and phase 2 which shows the full 150 megawatts that'll be there in about 6 months, 75 of which is there today. The red rectangle down here in the middle is kind of our first thrust of development. And if you look to the right, it's kind of a blow up of that component. If we flip ahead, we'll give you a little more stats on what we've got here. So we mentioned we've got 10 home builders. We've got 5 active neighborhoods. If you look on the map, the yellow areas are the actively selling neighborhoods right now. We've sold just under 2,100 lots to builders, of which we've closed on about just under 1,700 of those lots. Several of those are under takedowns. Through September 30, is there a question?
Yeah. Hi, Tom. This is Dennis. We have a question from the audience. They were kind of curious about the vetting process for selecting new builders for Babcock Ranch. And I think this is a good opportunity for us to kind of talk around that.
Yeah. It's interesting. In these large scale greenfield projects, there's a little bit of a pendulum game of, early adopting, kind of proof of concept versus, established credibility in the marketplace. So I think you got to look at the evolution, I think, in the timeline. I think early on, we were trying to find like-minded builders who bought into our vision and could see value in the master planning approach that we were taking. And I think out of the gate, we found more of that in when the pendulum was more, I'd say, in the builder front than the developer front. We found more interest and demand from the local regional folks who knew of Babcock Ranch, knew of Kitson Partners. We've got a very successful, completely opposite of Babcock, high-end luxury gated golf course community that's only 40 minutes south of Babcock called Talus Park. So we had a lot of builders in Southwest Florida who knew Talus Park and knew of our company's ability to execute, that came in early, adopting kind of into the system and into our vision. I think as those builders had early success, the public builders started showing up, like Lennar and Pulte and Meritage. Meritage joined here just recently, here this past summer. Lennar and Pulte came in 2017. So I think we've got standards, we've got architectural guidelines like most places. We've got other components in terms of energy thresholds and whatnot. But I think it's a good question that, Dennis, I'd rather hit that as we get to the end of this, talk about the workshop. That was a big part of the workshop front as well.
Okay. One other quick question related to this while you're on it, Tom.
Yeah.
So the new home sales that you have mentioned here, are those all single-family detached?
Correct. Those are all single-family detached homes. Actually, I take that back.
Okay.
Lennar is also building a kind of a villa product, a twin. So some of that is twin, but I'd say 90% of it is single-family detached.
Okay.
Average home price is right around $330,000. If you look in this map, and you'll see some pictures later, but Betsy, can people see my cursor if I move it around the map? Or no? Can you guys see this?
Yeah,
no?
We can see it, Tom.
You can't see it. Okay, so that area there right south of the lake is called Founders Square. So we've got about 98,000 square feet of kind of call it retail-ish, amenities that sit there. We'll get into that in a bit, but we've got a restaurant called Table and Tap. We've got a retail shop called Curry Creek Outfitters. We've got a general store called Slater's. We've got an ice cream shop. We've got a collaborative workspace that's called the Hatchery. We've got the 25,000 square foot health and wellness center. Things like that. This is kind of the heartbeat of this initial phase, and all that sits right here at Founders Square. Excuse me. We got the school that we've talked about. We talked about the solar. We talked about the hiking and biking trails, and the autonomous shuttles. That's all there today. What's coming here quickly? If you look down here in the lower portion of this aerial, right here we've got an 85,000 square foot grocery anchored center that the horizontal is already underway. The vertical will start there likely in January. We've got a JV in place here for a 336 unit, 4-story elevated apartment complex. And we received an $8 million grant from the state of Florida this summer to build a storm shelter. In the state's eyes, it's a storm shelter. Here on Babcock Ranch, in our eyes, it's going to be a field house / sports complex that'll double as a storm shelter in the event of a storm. So that's under the planning stages as to where we're going to locate that and what that's going to look like. It's likely going to sit right here. So we've got a bit of a more density, and this ends up being more of a commercial type node as you kind of come from Founders Square south towards the field house. Some photos. This is our entry up here on the left. Another view of the entry and the land bridge that cuts across the property. Our hiking trail in the lower left. This is the lake house amenity, which sits in our Lake Timber neighborhood. It's the only amenity that we've built so far that's private, meaning Babcock is not a gated community. It's a town. And so it's open to the public, and we get quite a bit of traffic from Southwest Florida. All the amenities in Founders Square are open to the public. The lake house is for residents only. So there's a pool here. This is a facility you can rent out, have events at, et cetera. That's only for the folks that live at Babcock Ranch. This is a rendering. This is the only rendering, I think, in the deck. Everything else is an actual photo. This is Founders Square that we talked about. Restaurants here. Our offices are on the second floor next to it. Our welcome center is on the first floor. Got the adjacent retailer here called Curry Creek Outfitters, Slater's and the Hatchery and the ice cream shop here, pre-K daycare here, and the Lee Health Center here, and our band shell here. This is an actual photo looking across the lake into Founders Square. And again, that's where all the activities taking place. This is our health center with Lee Health. This is the Great Lawn and Founders Square. This is the restaurant Table and Tap. Our Discovery Center called Woodley Hall, the first floor of which is kind of our information discovery center, the second floor of which are our offices. Gets a lot of traffic in and out. Slater's is our general store on the first floor. Hatchery's second floor for our collaborative workspace. Ice cream shop, Square Scoops right here. Bloom Academy is our pre-K daycare operator in the first floor of this building, and that's our band shell. These are some homes. So these were some of the earlier homes that the local regional guys came in. You know, someone asked the question earlier, how did you select your home builders? You know, front porches were a big part, outdoor living, know your neighbor. So Homes by Town and Fox Premier Builders and Stock came in out of the gate, building great product. We got homes that range on the low end at $199 and the high end up to $1 million plus. As I said earlier, the average home price ends up being about $330. These next homes are a sampling of the Lennar and Pulte homes and Meritage homes that are being built. The large share of the volume of home sales is coming through these three public builders. These are the more attainably priced homes. The custom regional guys obviously get a little more pricey in their price point, which is a great product to have, but it's a smaller piece of the pie. Some more pictures. Again, trying to activate through activities and programming. This is an actual photo of our solar array, a portion of it. You can't quite see all of it. This is the substation up on the site. The battery station was put in here. This is one of our autonomous shuttles. Here we go. Here's the battery storage facility here, and some solar trees that Florida Power Light has put throughout the community. I'll pause there. I know I'm throwing a lot out there, talking pretty quickly, so we'll pause here. We're 30 minutes in. So any questions before we get into the actual workshop?
Yeah, just a couple questions, and just as a reminder to everybody who's attending, rather than raising your hand, just because there's too many of you to manage scrolling down and unmuting you, be sure to type your questions into the queue, and we'll get to them that way. But one of the questions was, so earlier when I asked you about the single-family homes versus other, in terms of what you've been selling so far, do you see yourselves diversifying the product offering more over time? Because you mentioned I guess a duplex kind of product.
Yeah.
Do you envision maybe triplexes or townhomes or other things coming into play?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're already underway on building townhomes. We just haven't sold them yet. We sold a big piece of raw land to Lennar north of our lake, which is called Babcock National, which is going to be an age-targeted community. It's got 1,000 homes, of which 600 are attached. So 600 of the 1,000, okay. So 60% of the attached are going to be condos, townhomes, villas, et cetera. So there'll be a big chunk up there. We're under a letter of intent with a national multifamily developer to do 336 apartment units, so rental units as well. So yes, I think we led with single family, but for sure as we go, we're going to be bringing condo, townhome, villa, apartments, you name it. It's all going to be there.
And then along those same fronts, do you have any plans for single family rental mixed into your offering, or is it going to be mostly for sales?
We do. I think we believe in it. We think it's a great it's a great piece of the pie that's got to be there. We're already seeing, homes that are for rent in Babcock just from kind of mom and pop front. And we've been talking to several of the single family for rent builders out there that are doing it. I think some of the challenges you've got within master plans are, the add-on fees of the POA, the HOA, if you do a CDD, all those different costs that chip away at the margin for the rental guy. So we're working through that. There's absolutely a place for it, and we'll have it there. We haven't figured out the economic formula yet, but we'll have it.
Okay. Any plans for a golf course in the community?
Yeah. So let me just as you're asking these questions, let me be just easier if I just go back and just show one. Oop, is there a way to go back, Betsy? I'm going forward.
Oh,
here.
yeah. Hold on. I'll if you let me control, hold on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Take me back to the map. Take me back to the map that shows the kind of the where we sit today, as of September 30. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, so again, you guys can see my cursor. So this whole area up here north of the lake, this is Babcock National. This is the 1,000 homes that Lennar is currently developing, and this is an 18-hole bundled golf community within Babcock. And so, again, 60% of the product up here is going to be attached, and there's going to be a golf course up here in a bundled golf format.
Okay. There's one other question, but we'll actually hold on to, well, there's a couple other questions. There's one, if you're the person who asked about panelized construction, we'll hold on to that because that's actually part of the innovation workshop discussion.
Yeah.
But we will definitely get to that at that point. And then were the charter schools that you partnered with already established, or was that part of something that you created for the community?
We created it. We created it for the community. We led the charter process. We hired some consultants to help us through the process, got it approved at the state, and then went out and got financing in the bond market to build the school.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, I'm going to get you back to where you left off so we can go into the workshop discussion. And as I mentioned, we'll hold on to that question related to offsite as it will be covered here.
Yep.
And anyone on the phone, if you have any other questions, continue just as you go. We'll be monitoring them as Tom's speaking. Just be sure to type those in for us. And we'll make sure that we get to them either during this round or when we get to the Q&A slide again.
Okay, so we've got about a little over 20 minutes here left, and so I'll keep working quickly through these. So we're a developer, we're not a home builder, and so there's obviously a bit of a risk factor there for us, right? We don't control the last touch with the customer. We don't build the homes themselves. We build the amenities, we build the commercial, and we do all the master planning and design. So I think, we've been, inspired by the innovation of the industry overall, and we've kind of led Babcock down a path of innovation and sustainability and forward thinking. And so, one of the areas that we felt had some room for opportunity was the home building side. So we decided to host a workshop at Babcock Ranch back in September, and really weren't sure what to expect and kind of what kind of response we would get from the marketplace. But we were blown away by the response from the home building industry. We were able to bring all three of our public home builders in to the process, multiple architects, engineers, design folks, supply chain folks, even the Department of Energy, technology folks, energy folks. So we had a really great, diverse group coming together really for this purpose, as you're seeing here. Really long, looking again, we got this unique size and scale of an 18,000 acre, 20,000 home, 6 million square foot entitled project that's going to span multiple decades. How do we stay ahead of it? How do we create opportunity? How do we be a leader and a catalyst for change? And I think, we happen to be, sitting at a point in time, all of us in the industry, where there's a couple things happening that they're forcing us down this path, whether we like it or not, right? There's the affordability issue, which we can't not read about when you pick up something to read about housing. Everything's fundamentally is so strong. And the one thing we've all got to, be worried about and be aware of is that, the depth of demand and the lack of supply is creating this incredible pressure on pricing. and it's creating an issue for all of us to tend with. And so you got this pricing appreciation, you've got labor issues, you've got material cost issues. These things are all happening at once. I think it's forcing all of us to step back and say, what can we do about it? And so it kind of led us to saying, let's just try to bring some of that thinking to Babcock, and let's use Babcock, as kind of a playground for this, given kind of the bones of what's there today and the DNA that runs through Babcock is one of innovation. Let's host it there and see what we can accomplish with all the parties in the room that are touching this sector. And so we hosted that back on September 11th at Babcock. It was about looking at the near term and the long term. And it was really the home building process. It wasn't about, let's build everything off site. It wasn't about, let's just talk about smart home. It was really the whole process of the customer experience, buying a home, and then all the way through, the customer experience of living in the home once the home has been built. And then obviously, yes, off-site construction is a big part of that. The questions coming in about panelization, whether that's, other alternative materials like aerated concrete or Herky wall, Herky-Tech type technologies, panelization, modularization. So all that was discussed across the spectrum, smart home components, the air quality, water consumption, energy consumption, all of that was discussed over a day and a half in a fairly intense, fast-paced workshop setting, which was hosted by Larry Burns, our board member I talked about earlier, who was a former head of R&D at General Motors. So he hosted the event. We'll get to the results here in a minute. It was highly insightful to everyone, to us. I'll talk about Kitson. Our team was kind of blown away by the content and the quality of the discussion. And I think Babcock really resonated with everybody in the room, given what, we went up and toured the solar. We took a ride in the autonomous shuttle. We were hosting the meeting our dinner up in the hatchery, which is our WeWork space. We hosted the event in the Hive, which is our kind of second story space for above the daycare and pre-K overlooking the lake. So a fairly inspiring setting, and I think the results kind of showed from that. If you look, we spent a lot of time in advance of the workshop trying to get smart ourselves on talking to a lot of the experts in the industry, a lot of which participated in the workshop. And there were several key themes that came out of those calls. And again, I'm sure most people in this webinar are familiar with all this, so I'm not going to say anything that you haven't thought of or heard before, but it was a very consistent thread. We probably spent, I'm going to guess, we probably had 40 hours of phone calls with folks, kicking around ideas, topics, challenges, issues, opportunities. And this slide kind of captures, I think, some of those common threads. Talked about it earlier, but it felt like everyone felt we were on the cusp of some transformation, almost out of necessity. The price appreciation, labor costs, lack of skilled labor, material costs, et cetera. We're kind of being pushed in this direction, whether we like it or not. Again, size of scale Babcock seemed to be a resonating, point with the group, and being a catalyst for change. A lot of the builders talked about, needing to kind of set a level playing field and making sure that all builders are being held to the same standard to make it an equitable arrangement. One of the terms we heard virtually every call, art to part, and the lack of a one-stop software solution to really kind of make this industry, as efficient as possible, and the need for innovation, continued innovation on the software front. And then finally, one of the themes was the need for alliances with others, right? Whether it's the Department of Energy, whoever, but utility companies, which I think a lot of builders are doing, we're seeing across the country in different local regional plays in the Southeast and on the West Coast. But it's not just a risk and a cost that can be borne alone by the housing industry, but the need for alliances to help bring this stuff to life. Here's a snapshot of the diversity of who attended. Like I said, for us, blown away by the response, incredibly appreciative of all the folks who came down here to take time out of their busy schedules to collaborate and brainstorm and strategize with us. And you can get a sampling of it here. Like I said, engineering firms, architects, home builders, technology companies, Department of Energy companies, et cetera, supply chain. A lot of great hands-on people on the front line that are dealing with these issues every day, have a real appreciation for the constraints, the opportunities, et cetera, which we'll get to here as we talk about the actual event. So our first module was talking about the roadblocks with everybody, and we broke out. We had 3 different breakout groups. So we have 3 different rooms of people with leaders and scribes trying to consolidate and synthesize all the information. You can look here. I don't need to read all these word for word. You can kind of see what's on the screen. But as we all know, there's a general resistance to change in general. Housing market's been doing very well. Year over year numbers have been strong. Pricing's been going up, volume's been going up. In the background, we all know we're dealing with some tailwind or some headwinds rather on the pricing, the cost, and the labor, et cetera. One of the key takeaways on the constraints where you talk about putting some other industry folks in the room, the lack of R&D budget for the home builders to really try to, further their education and innovation side. 0.2% R&D investment. Talk to the folks in the room that were former, automotive industry experts and professionals, and it's kind of a drop in the bucket. I think the supply chain was a big theme. These home builders, as we know, spend a lot of time working the supply chain, have multiple, years and years of relationships and history together and efficiencies that have come about as a result of it. So there's some danger and some risk perhaps of deviating away from that supply chain. We talked about the BIM, art to part software being another roadblock. And then we talked about the consumer side of it too. There's an education aspect to this where, there's a perception out there where in Florida in particular, when you've got these storm locations in South Florida, that, kind of a CBS built home is just stronger because it's CBS, and that, there's no way a stick built home could sustain or withstand the same conditions as a CBS home, which from an engineering perspective and from a technical perspective just isn't true. But just educating the consumer as to some of these different ideas on innovation that maybe the sales and marketing teams in the front line of these home builders can be a little resistant to based upon the concern over the consumer acceptance and the optics of it. It's just to name a few things. I'm sure there's more we could talk about. I'm sure folks here on the call could probably add to this list. But for the sake of moving forward, let's just keep going. So we went from identifying the challenges to talking about the opportunities. What do we think we can do about it? I think the idea of an innovation center was a fairly common thread among the 3 different breakout rooms. And I think it was because Babcock Ranch brings some unique components to it. The idea of having an innovation center that everyone can kind of collaborate with, there's sort of a de-risking, kind of component to it, where we kind of share in that risk together and we learn together to help iterate faster. That was a big part of it. I think these super trades, economies of scale for combining trades, that was a common discussion point. Again, reminding the group, Kitson Partners is not a home builder. We're a developer. So I think part of this for us too was really interesting, just to get in the room with the home builders to hear firsthand, some of the constraints and some of the obstacles they're dealing with, as well as some of the things they're pursuing to change that dynamic. I think one of the opportunities, one of Larry Burns's, sayings, think big, start small, scale fast, right? So I think this idea of let's think big but start small scale, so that regardless, no one's going to bet the farm on something, but let's take those big ideas and start small. Maybe it's a street, maybe it's a street of 5, 10, 15 homes. Maybe it's a neighborhood of 50 homes, but let's start small to test and push the envelope on some of these innovations that are taking place in the home building industry. The next module is how can Babcock Ranch specifically become a catalyst for home building innovation? We talked about some of these themes earlier, but creating these standards to hold all the builders accountable to and create a level playing field certainly was one of those takeaways. The Innovation Center we just talked about. Critical on this, and we'll get into it in a couple slides, is just the senior leadership buy-in, right? I think we've all been through processes and different initiatives that without the buy-in from senior management at the top, a lot of these things end up hitting the floor. So I think talking about how do we get buy-in from the top across the home builders and the other folks involved in these innovations to make sure that we can progress at an efficient pace. Offsite production, I think everyone unanimously, agreed it was coming and it was a necessary piece of the puzzle. I think everyone also agreed there are lots of risks associated with it, primarily the capital intensive nature of starting a plant and what that looks like and who bears those costs and what happens when the market hiccups. And there's a lot of scar tissue from the past in the room, in the home builder front, of builders who took that path and had to abort the mission due to downturns, et cetera. But I think there's an acknowledgement that the Kateras, the Integras, others out there, pardon me, that offsite production was going to be a part of our future at Babcock Ranch. One of the really interesting pieces we talked about was this home as a service. Florida Power and Light was in the room, and they've got a whole division of Florida Power and Light that's focused on nothing but this, and creating opportunities where the utility company, in this case Florida Power and Light, would own the major appliances in the home, the HVAC, the hot water heating, et cetera, and basically the home buyer and the builder can take those costs off their balance sheet, and Florida Power and Light stands behind that and is the service provider to not only maintain those, but replace those when needed and be a service to the customer when needed. And across a broader front too, even talking about utility scale ideas where they can come into a neighborhood and provide for the neighborhood, centralized billing and potentially a fixed billing rate as part of almost an HOA fee, as opposed to getting the fluctuations in your utility bills over the course of the year. A lot of interesting ideas, but the home as a service, I think, became a pretty big talking point, and I think the builders took a great interest in some of the ideas and innovations that are happening at Florida Power and Light, as an example. I'm going to keep moving here just because it's already 2:50. I'm going to kind of try to pick up the pace. I'm just going to cut right to here because I think this encapsulates the prior two slides I just zipped through, just to try to get us to a stopping point for some Q&A. But this was really the culmination of what came out of the workshop, and this is what we heard. This is what everyone in the room came up with in the last hour and a half of collaboration to come to a conclusion and a punchline. And this is it. And I think this leadership coalition was kind of the idea, again, getting back to the CEOs of the builders that are involved here need to be weighing in on this and buying into this. Not just the local folks in the division, but all the way to the top, just to make sure that we aren't going to have a false start. And once we get past that leadership coalition, we've got a handful of CEOs on the builder side. We've got Kitson there. Perhaps there's an FPL or energy type group in there. But we've got some real strong leadership at the top that's providing the direction and the conviction behind this push to make it come to life. And then a lot of that coming to life takes place through the Innovation Center that gets created. And that Innovation Center is a collaboration of developer, Kitson, home builder, architects, designers, et cetera, that all kind of have a place, a living laboratory, if you will, to create opportunity and innovation that can be scaled at Babcock and beyond Babcock. And that's the innovation programs, the business ventures that come from the Innovation Center. And again, reminding ourselves, this is based on economics, right? This isn't just about trying to give the world a big bear hug and make everybody feel good. It's got to make sense. And, it's going to drive volume for the developer. It's going to hopefully drive margin for the developer. It's going to drive margin and volume for the builder. And it's also going to drive a better experience for the home buyer, right? So literally it's got to work on all fronts, or else we're kind of wasting everybody's time. And so that was kind of a good way to kind of bring everybody back to reality at the end on the win-win results. It's got to work for all parties involved. And so, again, I know I'm talking quickly and I'm trying to get through this to allow some Q&A, but that was really the gist of where we landed. It was incredibly powerful, day and a half. Made some great relationships, learned a ton, and have a real, very tangible set of action items that we're following right now, next steps to try to bring this to life at Babcock.
Oh, that's great, Tom. I can see why you and your team left so energized after this session. That's a lot of good content out of a couple of days. So it's fantastic, and really appreciate you sharing it. While we're waiting for the community to kind of come up with some of their questions, I have a couple of things I wanted to run by you. So if we can help you kind of build off of what you've already accomplished in those workshops and your roll up here, kind of a two-part question. So how do you see industry partners collaborating with Kitson Partners and Babcock Ranch?
Yep.
And then maybe as a further building on that, how can the Alliance community best help you? Because I noticed many of those names that were many of the organizations participating in your workshop are also major contributors to our community. So looking for opportunities again to work with you and help everybody out for the common win. Yeah, look, I think, and we welcome it. I think, again, for us, as I said, we're not a builder. So I think anybody that touches the industry that has an innovative idea or an innovative process, product, procedure that helps push the industry forward, we're agnostic. We want all that thinking and all that collaboration making its way to Babcock.
We really want to be a showcase for innovation and technology. So we did have a lot of folks in the Building Alliance there, which were incredible contributors throughout the day and a half. The real world's not as easy as a diagram. Builders are still competitors. You've still got publicly traded companies that work, at the mercy of Wall Street and meeting quarterly numbers. So none of this is without challenge. But I think what it needs to have behind it is the energy and the conviction that it's time well spent. I think we've got that. So I think, Dennis, to the extent members of the Building Alliance find this story to be compelling or interesting, by all means, we're open for business in terms of bringing the right folks in to help us, whether that's a home builder, an architect, an engineering firm, a design firm, a supply chain group, anybody that can help us, further the story. We'd love to bring them in the loop. We believe that, Babcock with 20,000 homes. So step back. Florida is one of the strongest, projected to be one of the strongest growth states over the next decade in the country. Southwest Florida is supposed to be one of the strongest growth markets within Florida itself. Babcock's within Southwest Florida. So from a risk perspective, we think, our location can provide kind of a de-risked approach to bringing in some of this off-site mentality in Southwest Florida, not just to cater to Babcock, but Babcock could be client number one, which is a pretty big client, to de-risk some of that economic volatility. But it's servicing the greater Southwest Florida region, the greater Florida state as a whole. We think there's a real story there to be told. And I think Babcock can be a real catalyst because it can de-risk that. And Kitson Partners, as a developer of a large-scale community like this, we can help de-risk that, as everyone can benefit from something like that, even the current stable of builders at Babcock Ranch. So, I'd say I don't have a specific, here's the one thing we need, Dennis, but I think in general, it's a very complex question, and there's so many parts and pieces to it. We welcome all those folks in to help us figure it out.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. Yeah, there's certainly no one silver bullet that's going to solve this problem, right? It's a robust ecosystem. There's 20 plus levers you have to be pulling at any given point in time to make the machine move the way it needs to move. No, that's fantastic. Well, we certainly look forward to continuing to support you through our community and through this innovation center as it gets launched. I think that'll be a real focal point for this conversation, as you've identified, going forward.
Yeah.
We have a couple of related questions, and we actually have a few other in the queue. We want to make sure that we give you some logistics things to close out today as well. So if you're on the phone and you've submitted something and we haven't gotten to it by the close of the hour, we'll just shoot those questions Tom's way, and then you can look for both an archive of this webinar, so the video recording link, and then we'll also include answers from his questions and an upcoming email to you as well. But I think we could probably deal with these two that kind of overlap a bit. You mentioned earlier when you talked about the average price point for a house in your community right now, it's $333,000 for sale. And you mentioned that a lot of people were telling you that your target customer was probably going to be retired because of, I guess, the demographics.
Yeah.
Well, the median income in your market per year is only $37,000 for a household. So I see, with the bigger builders coming in the lower 200s, that's moving in the right direction. So I guess the question is twofold. Do you have an attainable number in mind? Like, do you have a number you're targeting to help expand the price points that you offer in your community? What might that product mix look like? So that's part one, and that's really related to an umbrella question that was submitted. That's, what's the Babcock Ranch strategy to make homes in the community more attainable, i.e. lower costs without reducing quality? So I think those two things kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to think back to the very first question you asked. It was long.
Target price point.
Yeah, let me step back. So the average customer at Babcock Ranch right now, despite the market, the average home buyer, we've got, I think 55% of our home buyers' household income is greater than $100,000. And I think if you look at who's buying at Babcock, if you look at that data versus the region, I think it's closer to $60,000 median household income. But I think what you're seeing is there's a lot of noise in the data when you have retirees that make up half your pie that aren't necessarily, in that local MSA data. So it's a little trickier to say what's the pinpoint price. I think what we've been trying to accomplish all along is to create a multi-generational town that caters to everybody and is there from a rental perspective, from a lower entry price up to, the million plus, if that's where, you want to have. And I think we've been fortunate to be able to bring in builders that offer everything from 190 up to million plus strata. And I think what we're seeing is that the demand curve that's showing up is what that average price point is, right? So the reason it's $330,000 is because that's the bulk of the folks showing up in the marketplace are looking for that product. It obviously consists of everything from 200 to a million, but 80% of it is flowing through our public builders that are really in that kind of 200 to call it 400 range. So I think we do view, obviously understand the correlation between price and volume, and we really want to have a project that creates a lot of volume. We were just named the number one selling master plan in Southwest Florida this past summer, year over year. We want to maintain that, and I think having an attainably priced home is important. And so part of what led to this workshop was that, right? Again, we're not a home builder, so we don't control all those pieces of the puzzle, but we recognize and understand that to sustain ourselves long term, we need to be able to provide product that is attainable. And so whether that's smaller product, so you're not necessarily sacrificing quality, it might just be you're building a bit of a smaller product. It might be you're building a much more higher quality product because it's more efficiently built off site and it's done with savings and it's done in a shorter cycle time, and you can deliver that home at a cheaper price point because of the savings you've experienced in the build process. So again, we're not sitting there saying we've got to sell homes that are priced at X $1,000. It's more, we got to provide a very diverse group of homes to a very diverse group of home buyers across the spectrum and give nobody an excuse or a reason not to live at Babcock Ranch. And obviously, we're working closely with our builders to make sure that when we sell them land, while we can't control the price, we can control the lot size, we can control the square footage they put on the lot, and we can put collars on the upside that we get to participate in to help make it, guide them to that path of creating that more attainably priced home.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We are going to respect everyone's time. We just got a couple little things to share with you before we go. Thanks for sharing what you've learned from your workshop and what you're doing at Babcock Ranch. It's very exciting. It was great to see, some collaboration that you had going on to actually continue to move innovation forward in the community. So we do appreciate your time. As we said earlier, as Dennis said earlier, in talking with Tom today, this is really what we're going to be doing in more depth in about a week and a half now. In Denver, we've got segments on place, on product, and on production. So many of the things Tom's been talking about here, we're going to dig into more deeply with a few key snapshot presentations at first in each segment, and then we're going to dig into things more deeply in the same way that he did in his workshop with roundtable discussions. We've got 100 plus people lined up to come to this event now, with probably another 30 that have said they're interested. But we've got room for 150. So if you've not told us you're interested, there's still time to register. Registration will close next Wednesday, the 6th of November. And the earlier you register, the better seat you'll get at the table. It's a wedding, and if you're on earlier, you're going to get seated next to the premium people that you want to talk to. So take a look at that. Hope that you can join us if you aren't planning to already. And just as Natalie would tell you, if you're not currently a member of the Alliance, she runs membership for us. There's a lot of smart people on the phone today. We would love to have you take a look at actually joining our community, being part of the ongoing discussion. And you could just go to the Join Us page of our website to do that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Natalie will get off to you guys a link to the archive for this webinar, and we'll turn around and ask a couple of final questions that we got by email of Tom, and we'll get that to you as well. But thanks again, Tom. Thanks, Dennis. And thanks to all of you for taking time to join us today.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thanks, everybody.